Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. Time to catch up with our guy, Mike LaTulip, because we still got a lot of Illinois basketball to talk about. Haven't talked to him about the latest European edition. We got to talk about a five-star prospect who could be on the 2024 roster, who is currently visiting Illinois. We're recording this on Monday evening, June 3rd. And we can start talking about this roster in totality. So I'm excited to dive into this. Mike, how are you, man?
We're not done yet. Still got some time here before the offseason truly ends and these guys get on campus and you can kind of start to hear / see what the actual finished product looks like. So it's exciting, man. It's exciting time of the summer.
Yeah, we kind of started this talk. We wanted to talk about Kasparas Jakucionis, and I want to talk about Brad Underwood and what he's building here, but it's hard not to talk about a five-star prospect who's currently on campus because this doesn't happen all that often. I mean, think of the recruiting rankings era. You know, Will Riley, should he be an Illini at his current ranking, would be the highest ranked recruit to ever come to Illinois. And of course, Illinois has top competition for him, Kentucky, Alabama, all these, top college programs, but Illinois being in the mix there is new. Mike, and let's start there. Like the fact that Illinois has the pull, has the connections. I mean, obviously Orlando Antigua probably, is very in the mix here. Like this just shows the growing, sell that this program has.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? Like swimming in those waters, when you look at what that list looks like for Will, and having a legitimate shot, right? Like I've seen it in the past where it's like, hey, this coach has been to a lot of my games, throw him in the top 4, throw him in the top 5 with no real chance of landing those players. It's more of like a courtesy thing. Like this isn't the case with that. I mean, it sounds like they have a real shot to get him, and he's a hell of a player. Like when you watch him, there's certain guys that can just score the basketball, and it looks like they have like a magnet attached to the basketball when it goes to the hoop. And there was one play I was watching with him where like he's full speed, 6'9", dribbling down the floor with his left hand and like gets bumped and just kind of from 14 feet heading towards the baseline, like throws it up on the rim. And like at that speed, at that velocity, like that ball should just completely carom off the backboard into somebody's hands and it goes straight through the hoop. And like, that's just the kind of stuff that you can't really teach. And he's been efficient throughout this, especially through this spring and summer, early summer circuit, which is always great to see. And like, I don't know. I mean, when you look at how he like would fit in as a 24 recruit, I don't really care. I don't really care how he fits in. Yeah, right? Like those are the types of guys. Like it just doesn't matter. If you can get them, you get one of those guys.
Yeah, I know every fan listening to this knows Will Riley at this point, has been, trying to get up to speed on him the last couple of days, as all of us are. But a five-star prospect in the class of 2025, but he's 18 years old. He's from Canada, which means if he gets, he could be in the NBA draft next year. So it makes sense for him to reclass, go to the class of 2025. Unlike Jeremiah Fears, like he's just not going to be an NBA prospect. I don't think at this time next year. This guy would 6'8", 180, scored 42 points in a recent EYBL game, Mike. And again, Kentucky, Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, some of the top programs, college basketball, and then the NBDL down in Australia, which is really appealing to a lot of kids as well, are all in the mix here. What do you think he could be in 2024? Because I've heard some people, how does he fit? How does he impact? And I go, I don't care. You haven't had this kind of talent. This is an NBA player we're talking about most likely if he just keeps on the trajectory he is.
Yeah, and look, like that type of talent, and it's not just the talent, right? Like he's a guy that can coexist too. I mean, I watched him. He played with KJ. Like they've played together. I think it was the NBA Academy last year. I think they were on the same team. Like I was watching them scrimmage together. Actually had a pretty decent rapport. And so, he's a guy that can score the basketball, can shoot the basketball. And when you look at the makeup of this roster, like, I'm not going to say that's like, Helm Rickoff's going to obviously shoot it, but like in totality, like that's not really like a massive strength of this roster. So having a guy that can come in and at a minimum do that, I think is huge. And then I think there's the tantalizing skill set beyond that where you see his height at 6'9", like he's a really tall kid. Doesn't have, I'm the wingspan guy. Doesn't have like a crazy gaudy wingspan. Like I would guess he's like even or +1. But those type of guys, like if they can score the basketball at that size, it matters less. So, and then like you watch him too, and they run him off ball screens, and he's making like the correct reads where I come off, there's a big and drop, and I'm reading the low man on the weak side. And if he comes in, I throw that skip pass to the opposite corner. Like he can do all that at 6'9". Now, is that going to be like, hey, here are the keys, run, 15 ball screens a game? No, but like to have those types of options with a guy like him, with just a canvas, I guess, like that should be pretty enticing. It's why all these big time schools are after him.
If in a world where they're able to land him, Mike, where's he fit in? Like, how does this all fit together?
I mean, now you start getting into like does he start? I mean, I'd imagine, right? I mean, whatever his role ends up being, it's going to be like, hey, we need you to be aggressive and score the basketball. Like that is because he's a good enough playmaker to have that kind of like one track mind to go. And I'll get to this with KJ later because both of them actually do this really well. Is like when they both come off ball screens, they come off ball screens looking to score. And that mentality opens up the ability to facilitate. Because if you come off ball screens looking to pass, no one's going to honor you. No one's going to commit to you. So like, that's where I kind of see his fit is like, you can move him around wherever. That's when you have NBA type guys like that and NBA prospects like that. This is what that brings. It's not like, hey, this guy does this one thing. He's a specialist. We got to have him here. And if he can't do that, he's off the floor. You can at least throw him in there and continue to build with him.
Mike, we've talked about how not everyone's going to be happy on a team. And if you had a guy like this, how does that impact Trey White or Ty Rodgers or Kerry Booth or Jake David, whatever it is? For me, it's like no one on this team has really earned playing time quite. I think we know Kylan Boswell and Ben Hummerkaus are going to play big roles. I think we know what Ty Rodgers brings to this group. But outside of that, like you're going to have to compete for the minutes. If you're playing at Illinois now, I think that's the message is you're going to have to compete for playing time. There's a lot of talented dudes here.
And it's hard too, because as a staff, you sit there and you're like, we have a chance, like a real chance to get a guy this caliber. And do we run the risk of having guys that are upset and leave? And Jeremy, we've talked about this before. It may happen anyways.
Yep.
Right. So
and the guy's got to be worth it. Right. And I wrote that today. Like this guy looks like he's worth that risk.
Totally. Yeah, no, absolutely. And if like you can get another guy that, let's say he's a first round pick potentially, all that I think is on the table for a guy like him. So that type of talent and that, like I said, that caliber of player, you don't just say, hey, you know what? I think we're okay with what we have.
Yeah. All right, Mike, we haven't talked since Illinois added another talented lead guard here. We've talked about him on the podcast, but now it's a reality that Kasparas Jakucionis is now an Illini, 18-year-old out of Lithuania, going to pair with Kylan Boswell likely in that backcourt. What does he bring, and what's he add to the mix there?
Basketball IQ. I'm sure you guys have touched on that a bunch here over the last week or so. But look, guys that come from that type of ecosystem, they're super well coached. He's been exposed to an incredibly high level of basketball. And the EuroLeague stuff, look, he played a couple games for FC Barcelona. A lot of those games were already in hand. He came in at the end. I think the one thing that sticks out when you watch those minutes is like he doesn't look totally out of place. And that's more so physically. Like he has a really good build, I think. And when you look at like how he projects for this Illini team, he's going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to be setting the table. And, I think that helps Kylan, that helps Trey, that helps Ty, that helps Ben. And, think about like what it does for Tommy as a roller, for Tommy as a popper, for Ben as a spacer and as a popper, for a guy like Kerry Booth, who you say, hey, if he gets more catch and shoot opportunities and a guy that can deliver it on time, on target, maybe he shoots a higher percentage. So all those things. And then for like Kylan and Trey and Ty, these are really good cutters. So now you have a guy that can really pass. Like, it unlocks a lot of what I think they want to do, and I think it accentuates a lot of the skill sets around KJ. And look, like they're gonna play in back downs like they did last year, but they're gonna run more ball screens this year. And so, and I think you have more pieces to be able to do that and do that effectively. And I think KJ adds to that. There's definitely going to be an adjustment period, I think, for him. I think, Tommy is much more plug and play, I think, like ready out of the box than maybe KJ is. But I think KJ can still make a really big impact. It just remains to be seen what that impact is.
Yeah, like I don't want to throw star right away expectations on him, even though Mike, like I watch him and I love his game. His positional size, his skill, the two words we keep using, or the two phrases we keep using about like all the additions they have here. But what is your floor for him next year, and what do you think his absolute ceiling would be? As he gets adjusted and with the team and figures it all out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the floor and the ceiling thing is always tough. I think you got to look at, historically, when guys have come straight from overseas to college basketball, the guys that have typically had the most success are bigs. It's Andrew Bogut in 04-05. It's Lauri Markkanen. It's, Tubelis was really good when he came over. The Wagners came over and had a lot of success. Like, all those guys were ready physically, no matter where you drop them on the planet in basketball, because they're 7-footers or 6'10", they're skilled. And then you have the guys that like have had kind of moderate success, I think, coming over to maybe the Kerr Krizas. Yeah. Taron Armstrong is another guy that, came over from Australia and was 11-6, like at Cal Baptist, and went back to Australia. And there's been guys that, like, over the years that haven't worked out. I mean, one guy that comes to mind for me, because he was a freshman when I was a freshman, was Amadeo Della Valle from Ohio State. So he came over. He did spend a year at Findlay Prep, but he came over as like a shooter kinda, and was kind of more of a specialist. And those guys tend to kind of drown because they come over and it's like, okay, well, you're too skinny to be on the wing in the Big Ten. So we kind of got to make you a point guard. And if you're not a point guard and you can't handle it, you're going to do what he did and go back to Italy. Mm-hmm. So for KJ, I think, this is a little bit unique, because every guy that I just mentioned was Australia, was Germany, was, and some of those Wagners were playing for Alba Berlin. Like, they were playing in kind of the same farm system as KJ is. But, this is a new era now. Like, this is kind of rare to have guys of this caliber in that ecosystem, the EuroLeague ecosystem, even though he was like played a couple games, but is also in that kind of farm system. Like, these guys don't come over here that often. So it's hard, like, to give a floor and a ceiling. It's like part of it's wait and see. But the one thing I will say is, like, people have to understand that the type of player that he is, there's going to be an adjustment period. And anybody that is a playmaker like he is, like, don't be surprised if it's the first exhibition game and he has 4 turnovers, because this is just what happens with playmakers. Like, playmakers are inherent risk takers. Yep. So you just got to understand that. Like, and it's not Curbelo level by any means, but that's just what those guys bring. Because in order to make, 80% of the time, they're going to make high level playmaking or, plays. But the other 20% of the time, there's going to be times where you're like, hey, what are you doing? Yeah. Where did you see that read? And that's the adjustment I think he's going to have to make, because the game's going to be a little bit quicker for him. He did have exposure to being around like the Satoranskis and the guys that were on that Barcelona team, that EuroLeague team that he was on and practiced with and played with a little bit. So gaps are going to close quicker. Guys are going to close out quicker. Rotations are going to happen quicker. And when you watch the film, it's like the turnovers that he has, some of them are like leaving your feet for lobs. They're aggressive turnovers. And I'm just warning everybody that they're going to happen. Like, they're going to happen.
Another example I just looked up, Mike, was Sky Clark. starting point guard is an 18-year-old, right? And he had 5 in his first game against Eastern Illinois, had 4 a couple games later against UCLA, 4 against Texas. So yeah, like there's going to be, for all these young guys, like there's just a different level. And I know he played in the pros, Mike, but this is still a step up, right? Like,
Yeah,
still a step up.
No, it is. And I think the difference between, and this is like nothing against Sky Clark, but like, you don't want a guy like Sky Clark, turning the ball over 4 times in a game, sometimes 5 times in a game, because he's not going to get it back with the other stuff, right? Like with the actual playmaking that's kind of unlocking the guys around him. KJ will do that. Right. So that's my point is like, yes, you're going to see some risk taking. You're going to see you may see some turnovers, but you're also going to see some high level playmaking that really, really builds the pieces around him. And that's like a broader point that I'll make is like, this is great for Kerry Booth, right? Like this is great for Tommy Avicic. It just is like it's great for Ben, for Humrickhouse, for Trey, for Ty. It's good for everybody. Like that's the type of guy that you're getting. Will he be like all Big Ten first team? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's just going to be, there's a little bit of mystery to it for sure. But, the skill set that you do see out there is incredibly promising. And I think he's going to make guys better for sure.
Mike, I don't know your experience with this, but like this guy's coming to a new country. And I know we're dealing with this more and more often, but this isn't like even Canada to the US. And I know basketball is kind of a global culture, but it's still a big change. Like how big of an adjustment is that for guys like Tommy or Kasparas here?
I mean, I think it's a big adjustment. I think these guys, the guys that have played in like the NBA Academy and have come over to the States for certain things. I think KJ's going back overseas in August to play in like a tournament, like maybe a national team type tournament as well. So like those guys are, I think, a little bit accustomed to going back and forth. But I think of Tommy Avicic too. It's like, hey, your brother just did it.
Yeah.
And if he had the crappiest time in the world, maybe Tommy wouldn't be coming over. But clearly, Big Z enjoyed himself a little bit over here stateside. So I think there's always an adjustment. Like there's an adjustment when guys come over from freaking the north suburbs of Chicago, right, down to Champaign, and you're away from family and everything. And I think these guys are just like a little bit more built for that.
He's been in Spain, right? He's
already been away from home. Yeah.
You feel that, guys? Warmer, sunnier days are calling. And fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart and Keto, or my favorite, Protein Plus. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine with Factor. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore, so you can crush your wellness goals this May with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. So treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. And the best part, you keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. So enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. So head to factormeals.com/Illini50 and use code Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% of your next month. That's code Illini50 at factormeals.com/Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month.
All right, Mike, we now know 11 players that are going to be on this team, including 9 newcomers. Just what have you made overall of Brad Underwood and what he's trying to build here this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole offseason, when you look at the additions, like I see a staff that feels very secure. And when I say secure, I don't mean from the standpoint of like job security, right? Like no one's on the hot seat. Like that goes without saying, right? Like their jobs are very secure, but there's a certain like confidence and security in you have with who you are as a team. And so you can kind of, I guess, you like the offensive system that you have, right? You like having the positional size. And, they're saying like, hey, we don't care if we grab the preseason headlines. Like I watch some recruiting that goes on around the country, and I just feel like that is top of mind for some staffs. Like, shoot, we got to go make a splash. We don't care who he is, how he fits in. Now, like Will Riley's are different, but like, hey man, we got to like get this guy because he's, this top guy according to this ranking in the portal. And like, that's going to get our fan base excited. That's going to get our donors excited. And like, you don't really start recruiting for fit overall, like across your roster. And I think that's what Illinois has done. And like, they've kind of put it together. They've put together a team. They've put it together their way. And they think, obviously they're going to win a lot of games. And I think they will too. Like you look at the Big Ten is freaking wide open. Like it is more wide open than I think I've ever seen it. And that's with 18 teams in it now. Maybe that makes it more wide open. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you see it with the size at each positional spot. And then last point is just like you see it with the balance of just the plug and play guys and the development pieces. Because like you're straddling two different things here where it's like, yes, we're going to win and we're going to win right now. But also like we've kind of set ourselves up to build for the future a little bit and have like the plug and play guys mesh with the development pieces and have those development pieces be able to operate more of like an incubated environment of like, hey, Kerry Booth, and we don't need you to do anything outside of what you're capable of because we have the players that can do those things. And like, if you just play your way and play to your strengths, you're going to be more efficient. You're going to pop more when it comes to like your NBA draft prospects, all that stuff. And all that stuff factors in. And I think it's important to note because, we've seen over the years, like there's been a much more of leaning into like get old, stay old. I think that's been the case across college basketball. I think it's changed a little bit.
I keep going back. I keep thinking about this too, just big picture, Mike. Like I know Brad's coached Michael Beasley, he's coached Juwan Evans, he's coached some really high level players, but you think of his ultimate success before he got to Illinois was Stephen F. Austin running that spread offense. And, then they have run this press Virginia defense. They had to early on here at Illinois because they didn't really have any bigs, but like just his evolution year to year has been fascinating to watch. Just how he evolves, how, which directions he goes and how often he does it. What have you made of that, of how he's kind of evolved as both his style of play and just his kind of roster building here?
Yeah. You touched on it pre-Illinois, and even at Illinois too. Like, let's start with like those initial teams, right? Tough, but lacking talent. And so it was full denial defensively. It was, hey, let's take big swings. Let's create havoc. Let's create turnovers. And like, that's going to be our way of trying to survive and eke out some wins here and there because we just don't have the talent. Right. And then it's like, okay, well, now Io comes in and Kofi comes in. And, particularly with, Io goes without saying, but like for Kofi, it's like you shifted and it was more 4 out, 1 in. And that's how you had to play with Kofi. You played drop. And then, Kofi leaves. And I think the impressive part was like, you were a 1 seed with Kofi and Io, obviously. And Curbelo, all those guys on that team, Trent, you're a 1 seed, and then you go back to the tournament as a 4 seed, you win the Big Ten, and you're not like, damn, we need to find another Kofi.
Yeah.
Like we're so paranoid because we want to still have this success. And like so many teams and programs draw back on like, this may be the only way we can do it. So let's go find another Kofi. And you start to realize like, hey, there may not be a ton of Kofis out there. So then they shift over. Hey, we got Coleman, put Coleman at the 5. Now we're going to run 5 out. Now for that 22-23 team, we're going to switch everything off the ball, because we feel like that plays to their strengths. And you realize it's really not their strengths because you have too many young pieces to be able to talk off the ball. So you go back to more drop coverage and some other things. And then this year too, it's like, I thought this year was a great example of like, man, we get Marcus Damask and light bulb goes off in like late November. You're like, shit, let's post him. Let's get him in back downs. Let's play to his strengths because it would have been really tempting, I think, for a lot of coaches to be like, Terrence Shannon, 6'7", 220, put him in back downs.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't really his strength. And they avoided it, and Terrence still had an All-American season just doing what Terrence does. So, like, they've been able to kind of maneuver all these pieces and make it work. And I think all of that is kind of crescendoed into this, like, identity of just like, man, we're going to back you down. We're going to be a more, like, offensive-leaning team. right? Like that's been very evident over the past few years, particularly last year, where like if we get a good enough offensive group, then we don't have to be maestros defensively. Like that was proven last year. For like as upset as people got, like the proof was in the pudding on that one. So, like he's done a tremendous job. And I think now they've kind of landed. It goes back to what I talked about with that security. Like you're willing to be more creative with getting international guys and with playing a certain style because like you're secure.
Yep.
You're like, man, we've seen it. We've tested it out. And it's worked. And I think they've been sticking to it. That's been evident this offseason.
So, Mike, going back to this roster, what excites you most about this roster? Probably on the offensive side of the ball, I'd imagine.
Yeah. No, I mean, and there are some things that excite me defensively, but like offensively, I think just like the optionality. They've been very deliberate with the additions that they've made this offseason. And that's what makes it so fun to analyze because like it's, you're analyzing like a clear plan.
Mm-hmm.
Like what happened last year, what they kind of want to replicate, and what the other pieces they bring in that like, hey, there could be a little bit more of this, right? Like you're not getting KJ and then being like, we're not running any ball screens. Like they're going to run some more ball screens this year. Kylan Balls will come off ball screens. Murkaus will come off ball screens. Like there's a lot of guys that can do that. So they're going to do a little bit more of it. And they're going to have probably a little bit more of a blend. Whereas like, the other side of it was like, hey, we really need to get out in transition with Terrence. Oh, we'll set some higher like step up ball screens with Terrence to get him going downhill. But like, I think you'll have like a deliberate, true, like coming off ball screens, like guys that can make reads, throw to the back action, hit the roller, hit the popper, like clear the bottom side out, get Murkaus on a pop, Tommy on a pop, like optionality, right? Like you can play in a lot of different ways. And then, I touched on Kerry Booth too. Like I think there's a lot of potential there defensively for him. Like I think there's more rim protection this year too. Like Tommy's just big. Like he's 7'1", man. Like he's just going to be down there kind of bodying and being able to alter shots. And then Kerry, I think they're just going to kind of cut loose, and you could probably throw Merez in the same bucket where it's like, hey man, like go get some off the glass, like go be an athlete. I think all that's super exciting. And the last point is just like it's going to be another year of good basketball. Like, just is like that's what that international wave brings over, and that's kind of the guys they've gone and gotten.
I think with the talent they've accrued, I mean, all our concerns, Mike, are relative, right? To where Illinois basketball is now of what could hold you back in this big game, or what could hold you back in the second round of the NCAA tournament, or what could hold you back from true Big Ten title contention. So knowing that, like what concerns you about this roster?
I mean, I think I'll tell you how concerned I am about the defense when I see what the offense looks like. But I think, you always have to wonder about the defense. You have a couple guys coming over internationally. I don't expect Ivisic to have any issues. We'll see how things are with KJ defensively. Like I'll show some clips in the film. Like he holds up for sure. Now we'll see what it's like taking this next step. Boswell guards, like one guy we haven't mentioned once on this podcast is Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, who I think is going to take a step this year. And it showed last year that he can be arguably the best on-ball defender on the team. And that's only going to push guys. So I'm really curious, not necessarily a concern for me. I'm just really curious to see like what the makeup of this team looks like defensively and who really makes an impact on that end. And then like the last point that I'll make is just around shooting. All right. Like Hummerkaus going up a level. I expect that fully to translate just because of his release point, how quickly he gets it off, like his size, all that. But like can Trey White and Kerry Booth and these guys like limit off the dribble threes, because that's going to increase their percentage. KJ was a guy that in the Adidas Next Generation stuff, like predominantly took threes off the bounce, like was only 25% catch and shoot, but was 35% off the dribble. So what does he look like shooting the ball this year? Like all those things I think are question marks. And Kylan, like, can Kylan kind of keep up his high 30% 3-point shooting mark? Like that's going to be really imperative for this team because, for KJ in particular, it's like, if you're going to play in more ball screens, it was like Michigan State 2 years ago. They had Joey Hauser, and wow, man, that made life really easy for Tyson Walker and AJ Hoggard off of ball screens because it's like Hauser 46%, Aikens 41%, and like you have all this space to operate. Whereas like if you become this team that teams think are like, hey man, like, no, we'll let you shoot. They're just going to start shrinking and packing the paint, and it's going to make it more difficult on these playmakers. So, the defensive side of the ball and the shooting, like, I can't say I'm like concerned, but like I'll say that it's a question mark, and it remains to be seen for sure.
There are more, I feel like, offensive options on this team that I can count on, because I mean, there were times like couldn't really count on Quincy Guerrier or Justin Harmon, towards the end of the year. And those guys aren't really offensive initiators. I feel like there's actually more of those guys this year. I'll even throw Ty Rodgers into that conversation with Trey White, with Humrickhouse, with Boswell, with Kasparas. But like, you don't have the known, like, we didn't know Marcus Damask at this time last year, but he was an elite scorer. Terrence Shannon was an elite scorer that's going to get 8 free throw makes a game. Those are the questions I have, is like, do you have that guy who lifts you? Do you have those two guys? Is it Humrickhouse and Boswell? Is it somebody else? I don't know. Or is there enough scores in the aggregate that it all leads to a similar style offense?
Yeah. I mean, like, you look and, we've been kind of spoiled over the past few years where it's like Terrence Shannon and, Marcus was almost 20, like 18, 19 a game in conference. Terrence
you've had what, 4 guys that have averaged 18 plus points in conference over the last 4 seasons, right? With Io, Kofi, Terrence twice, and Marcus. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there may not be a guy in this team that averages over 17, 16, right? Like, you may have Humrickhouse and Boswell and look, like, Avicic, man, like, I'm telling you, I'm trying my best, Jeremy. Like, I do not see a world where he does not translate in a big way.
I keep calling him taller Rink Mast, and I love Rink Mast. Like, the impact he had on Nebraska, I just feel like he could do the same thing for.
No, like, I think, and maybe someone will like clip this up in February and throw it in my face, but like,
we're allowed to get excited about guys.
I don't know, like Brandon Paul and Yogi Ferrell and these guys that play for for a team that's in his league, like, he had 25 and 8 on them the other day. Like, how I can't fathom a world where he comes over here and isn't really productive. Like, I think he has a chance to be like pretty easily like a top 5 big in this league. And I think Illinois as a whole would have so much more preseason recognition if Avicic was a transfer.
Yeah.
Like, a guy with his skill set and, the way he plays the game and his size, like, he would have been one of the top, I think, like, big man transfers in the portal. So you go and get him, and it's like, because he's an international player, it's like, oh, like, no one's like, most people aren't sitting there on Synergy watching Tomislav Avicic. But I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, he's a really good player. So, like, I don't know. Like, is he like a 11, 12, 13 a game guy? Like, Humrickhouse, I could see in that like 13 to 15 range. Boswell, I could see in that 12 to 14 range. Like, you mentioned, kind of on the aggregate, like, that's probably going to be much more balanced than what we're used to over the past few years, where it's like, we saw early last year. It was like Terrence Shannon, 21 points a game. And Damask still at that point was like 10 a game. Yeah. And we're like, someone's got to get up there. So it's going to come down a little bit. But, I think there's just going to be probably more balance all the way across the board, in my opinion.
Yeah, listen, our guys tried the best. Like, with some of these overseas guys, we don't even have them ranked yet, Mike. And these rankings are imperfect. We know that. But, like, so you put up their 29th overall offseason with transfers and preps. And it's like, you're not counting 2 guys who are probably starting for you. Yeah, which I don't know where they'd be right now, but like, that would increase that ranking. And how do we rank those guys efficiently based on the competition? You don't see them going against the same competition at their age level, so it's really, really difficult. But everyone's skill, and for me, Mike, the fit of all, we keep coming back to it. The fit of all of these pieces just makes sense. There's a clear vision. There's a clear identity of what they're going to do. Like, I think we know how they're going to play. We just got to see how they actually play.
Yeah, and like, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, I don't think, like, this staff doesn't care to win in April and May. Right? Cool. You want to, like, rank us wherever you want in the transfer rankings. Because, I mean, I saw 5 teams last year that were in the top 10 that didn't make the tournament. So, like, we'll go out and get 2 international guys that most people know nothing about. And we're totally cool with that because we know what they're about and we know what they bring. So, there may not be like this Illinois team may not be ranked preseason top 25. I think they're a top 25 team. Like I do. So it'll be interesting. Like I was looking at some stuff the other day. It's like, I was going back and looking at history like I do. And post-COVID, on the average, and I went back a little further and like it averaged out about the same too. Every year, pretty much on the average, 2 teams that made the Elite Eight the prior year missed the tournament entirely.
Mm-hmm.
2 teams. So you got to think between UConn, Illinois, Purdue, Tennessee, Duke, NC State, and Alabama and Clemson. Pick 2 teams, because odds are 2 of those teams aren't going to make the tournament. If the averages hold up. So it's interesting, man. Like, is NC State the easy one there?
Yeah, NC State and Clemson would probably be most people's pick from the outside, right? Like that's kind of the easy one, but yeah, picking the harder one would probably be the fun.
And the other thing I was looking at too was like, we talk about preseason rankings and how they don't mean anything, and like I believe that in a way, and I more so think about that from the standpoint of like when we do postseason awards, it's like he's coach of the year. His team was projected 10th preseason. It's like, well, but when you look at the AP top 25, like historically has been a pretty good indicator of who makes the tournament. I mean, last year it was 84%. 21 of those 25 preseason top 25 teams made the tournament. Now you have like the Villanovas and the teams that just kind of like get the nod because of the history. But like, the last 3 years in particular, like it's been 84%, 76%, 76%. So if your team is in the top 25 preseason, like over a 75% chance you make the tournament. So we'll see how all that shakes out. We'll see how the voters view the international prospects for Illinois. But I mean, either way, man, it's exciting.
One more thing that is exciting. Illinois has 2 guys that are playing right now as we're talking in the USA Basketball's U18 team in the America Cup in Buenos Aires. Perez Johnson will be here, obviously, for Illinois this season. Jeremiah Fears, one of the top guards in the class of 2025. What's the value of that? We've seen some Illinois guys be involved here. Ty Rogers, I would assume. I know Adam Miller was even in. Kendrick was in some of the practices and stuff like that. So what is the value of that for guys and the value for Illinois to have 2 guys on that stage?
The value is, so I may zag on this a little bit.
Yeah.
The value is not in like, oh, you're getting exposure to international every year they go over there and kick the crap out of everyone they play. Right. Like you're not going over there and like getting better by playing that competition. Because like what's going to happen is we're going to see a score come across our phone. You're like, oh, they beat Latvia, 119 to 47. Right. But what it is and what it should do is give you confidence as a player. Like, man, you rep the country and you were selected from a crop of guys. It's like the top crop of guys at your age nationally. So that alone should have you come in. Like if you're Merez, like you should be able to come into the summer, like with a little bit of a pep in your step. Like, hey, no, I belong because I've been selected to this really, really, elite class of guys that are going over to represent the country. And same thing with Jeremiah. Like, he's in a different position where like he's going over and going back and playing in high school. So yeah, no, I think that's the part of it for me. That you've been able to represent the country, and that should give you a lot of confidence in doing that. I know Kendrick came in with like a lot of confidence as well when he did that. He came in the summer and we were like, whoa, like he was already a stud, but like, and he didn't need any more confidence. He had all that, but like it helps,
sure,
wearing the red, white, and blue and having those pictures and I don't know, man, I never wore a USA jersey, but I would imagine it'd be pretty damn cool.
Be pretty cool. All right, Mike, last one. NBA Finals prediction. You got
one? I mean, I'll say this, like I love Luka. He's been unbelievable. It's probably selling him short to say he's been unbelievable in the postseason. Like he's been unbelievable his entire career. Just like watching the way he manipulates the game. I think Kyrie has kind of shown he's still one of the better guards in the league. They freaking nailed the deadline with Gafford and with Washington and how those guys fit in. They nailed the Lively pick. These other guys that they have and Derek Jones Jr., like all these guys fit in so well. And they make so much sense. Go ahead.
One of the craziest stats, I was just looking through stuff, is Luka not only has been a 5-time All-Star at age 25, 5-time All-NBA first team.
First team.
That's insane at 25 years old.
I'm the biggest Steph Curry fan in the world. He has 4. So, like, you know, I say all that, right? Like, all these things that the Mavs have done, how much I enjoy watching them play because those pieces are fit so well. And yet I just have such a hard time believing that the Celtics do not win this series with all the bites at the apple that they've gotten, right? Like, this has to happen.
I think so.
It has to happen.
I hate that Luka's the guy across from me.
That's what I'm saying. Look, so my official prediction, I'll say, you know, I don't like, I think it's a cop out to say like this team in 7. Like, I think I'll say the Celtics in 6.
Okay.
But goddamn, they do not have the best player in the series.
That's right.
Luka's the best player in the series. And at that, like, when you
At
have
times,
the
feels
best player, anything's possible. We saw it in 22 with Steph. Steph was the best player in that series, and he freaking carried those guys to a title. And I think, you know, it's all going to come down to how they decide to guard Luka. Like, do you put Holiday and White on him? Because if so, that's advantage Luka with his size. Do you put Tatum and Brown on him? Like, do you want to put that type of defensive mileage on 2 guys you really need to depend on to score? You know, do you switch 1 through 5, right? Just so that you're like staying home on some of these guys, and that you're saying like, hey, you know, if you want to go at Porzingis and Horford and one-on-one all series, fine. Maybe it'll tire you out. Or do they do like what they did with Steph, where they had Horford like up high, but in like a high drop, and Steph cooked them with that. Or do they just say, hey, we're playing 2-on-2 in the middle of the floor when ball screens? We're staying home on PJ Washington. We're staying home on Josh Green, on these shooters, Kyrie, on these shooters on the outside, and we're just going to keep this game right here and just depend on, you know, Porzingis and Horford being really good in ball screen coverage.
You mentioned Gafford, Lively, just unbelievable what those guys have met. But Washington in those threes, but just Doncic's ability to dissect and to play at his pace, and just people don't realize how big he is, but just how smart he is, Mike. Like, and his ability just to, is he the best hooper ever? I don't know, but like it's insane what he's doing right now.
He's got the type of game where he could play 18 years in this league, and like, just imagine the accolades. I mean, he's gonna, like, there's a world where like if he surpasses 15 years in the league, like there's going to be a serious conversation that's going to be had, because like the accolades and the track record is going to be pretty undeniable. Now, winning a title this year would be a massive step forward. I don't do the whole Bill Simmons, like, you win the title, you got the belt thing. Like, I like Jokic is still the best player in the league.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Like, that's something that we forget, right? Like, oh, well, he lost in the second round. It's like he was up 20 in the second half against, like, they should not have lost that game. So yeah, it'll be fascinating. It's just, we do all the legacy talk too, but like Tatum, for a guy as good as Tatum, like, man, like the heat that he takes, it's only going to be louder if they somehow lose to the Mavs in this series after having, you know, one of the better regular seasons of all time.
Mike, I'm copping out. I'm going Mavs in 7.
I love it. I think they steal one in Boston. Not that home court has meant anything in the playoffs. So like, that's, you know, Boston could go and win 2 in Dallas and be up 3-1 going back home. So, but I wouldn't be surprised to see, you know, Luka have, you know, 38 in one of these games and lead them to a win in TD Garden.
Yeah, we talk about Luka, and then you got Kyrie just goes off for 36 anytime.
Porzingis was a Maverick. Like, there's a lot of different storylines. You got the Grant Williams piece of this where he gets shipped out of both teams, and now they're in the finals. I'm excited, man. The NBA playoffs, for the people that don't watch the NBA frequently, like, if you've tuned into this playoffs, man, it's been pretty incredible.
The West has been insane. Well, Mike LaTulip, you are the goods. Thanks as always for the basketball insight. And if Illinois adds a certain 5-star, we'll have to catch up again and break that all down.
Sounds good, man.
All right, that's Mike LaTulip. Thanks to him. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review, wherever you get us. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notifications bell. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.